What if I told you that captured German soldiers in World War II, men who expected punishment, starvation, and misery, were instead greeted with ice cream, Coca-Cola, and cigarettes in the middle of wartime America? To the German mind, shaped by years of Nazi propaganda, America was supposed to be weak, greedy, and cruel. Yet behind the barbed wire of American POW camps, they found not brutality, but abundance, and in the process, many of their deepest beliefs were shaken. This is the extraordinary story of German prisoners of war in America, and the shocking luxuries that left them speechless. The train pulled into Norfolk Station in January, year 1944, carrying a cargo unthinkable just a few years earlier. As the doors opened, hundreds of German prisoners of war stepped onto American soil for the first time, their eyes widening in disbelief. These weren't cattle cars like the ones they knew in Germany. They were luxurious Pullman coaches with upholstered seats and uniformed porters serving sandwiches and steaming coffee. One prisoner, Reinhold Pell, would later recall, "When the colored porter came through with coffee and sandwiches and offered them to us as though we were human beings, most of us forgot those anti-American feelings that had accumulated." That moment was a crack in the wall of propaganda. What followed would shatter it. When German troops were captured in North Africa, Normandy, or Italy, most braced for the worst. They'd been told the United States was a bombed-out wasteland, its people starving, its industry destroyed. Instead, thousands boarded ships bound not for misery, but for an unknown experiment in American power. Landing in American ports, they met curiosity instead of fury. Some townspeople stared, some offered cigarettes. Then came the second shock. Trains took them not to filthy compounds, but to clean, organized camps spread across the Midwest, South, and West. By year 1945, more than 400 camps were housing roughly 400,000 German POWs, a small temporary city of captured soldiers living inside the enemy's borders. Food was the first great revelation. Imagine a soldier who had lived for months on watery soup, black bread, and potatoes suddenly being served beef stew, white bread, butter, vegetables, and even dessert. Some thought it must be a trick poison, perhaps. It wasn't. Then came the shocker, ice cream. For many, it was their first taste sweet, cold, creamy, almost magical. Back in Germany, sugar was rationed, dairy was scarce, and luxuries like ice cream were unheard of. Yet here, in an American camp, they were handed scoops as if it were nothing. To top it off, they were given Coca-Cola a drink Nazi newspapers had mocked as the symbol of American decadence. Now it fizzed in their hands, sweet and ordinary, even for prisoners. Some wrote in their diaries that they couldn't believe Americans drank this every day. To them, it was like tasting the wealth of another planet. The irony of their voyage was profound. Many crossed the Atlantic in Liberty ships, the workhorses of the American fleet vessels mass-produced at a rate that stunned the world. While German U-boats hunted those very ships, the prisoners aboard them were unknowingly riding inside the proof of America's industrial miracle. Sergeant Hans Wacker, a veteran of the Afrika Korps, would never forget boarding a Pullman car in the US. In Germany, soldiers traveled in boxcars, cramped, freezing, degrading. In America, guards directed them to upholstered seats, even leaving empty spots between them to avoid crowding. Luxury and captivity? It didn't fit any story they'd been told. The camps themselves were built quickly but efficiently. Long wooden barracks, watchtowers, fences, yet inside, life was surprisingly humane. Prisoners slept on bunks, not floors. They had access to hot showers, clean water, and medical care. The Red Cross is inspected regularly to ensure compliance with the Geneva Convention. Many later admitted they were astonished by how closely Americans followed the rules, even for enemies. Leisure was encouraged to keep order. Camps had soccer fields, baseball diamonds, and orchestras. Prisoners painted murals, staged plays, and published camp newspapers. Some camp libraries held thousands of books. One German soldier said, "It was the first time in my life that I read books not chosen by the regime. I discovered Mark Twain, Jack London, and even American history. It changed me." America had a labor shortage with so many men overseas, so POWs were allowed to work on farms, in lumber mills, and in factories. They weren't forced into dangerous jobs, but they did hard, honest labor, picking cotton, harvesting wheat, cutting timber. For their work, they received small wages, usually in camp coupons rather than cash. Those coupons became freedom in miniature, traded for candy, toiletries, Coca-Cola, and cigarettes. Cigarettes, in turn, became a currency of their own, swapped for favors and snacks. Farmers often grew fond of the POWs. Many rural Americans had never met Germans before. They discovered ordinary young men, not monsters. Some families even invited them home for meals. Friendships formed that lasted decades. But the biggest impact wasn't physical, it was cultural. For years, Nazi teaching drilled the same message. America was weak, divided, and collapsing under capitalism. Yet the POWs saw something else entirely. They saw guards who followed rules, towns overflowing with food, children drank milkshakes and sodas, while siblings back in Germany spooned watery soup. One prisoner later wrote, "Everything I had been told about America was a lie." Here, even the poorest people lived better than the middle class in Germany. The taste of ice cream or a bottle of Coke became more than a treat, it was proof that their world had been built on falsehoods. Not everything was peaceful. Inside many camps, hardcore Nazi loyalists tried to enforce party discipline, threatening or beating those considered too friendly with Americans. A handful of murders occurred, so-called traitors were targeted by their own comrades. There were escape attempts too. Some tunneled beneath fences, others slipped away during farm work. A few vanished for weeks before recapture. Still, compared to the brutal treatment of POWs elsewhere, especially on the Eastern Front, life in the United States was remarkably lenient. To fully grasp their shock, look at Germany in the same years. Berlin and Hamburg lived beneath constant bombing. Food rationing tightened until many went hungry. Meat was rare, sugar almost non-existent. Children scavenged firewood from ruins just to stay warm. Meanwhile, their captured fathers and brothers in America ate full meals, drank soda, and played soccer under summer skies. Many POWs admitted guilt when letters from home described hunger while they themselves grew healthier than they'd been in years. One confessed, "When I was captured, I weighed 128 pounds. After 2 years in America, I weighed 185. I had gotten so fat you could no longer see my eyes." It might sound strange, but Coca-Cola became a symbol of American power. The company followed the GIs around the world, churning out millions of bottles. For POWs, tasting it was like tasting America itself, sweet, modern, industrial, unstoppable. Some later joked that Coca-Cola and jazz were the real weapons that won hearts. Ice cream carried the same message. While Germany rationed every calorie, the US handed frozen desserts even to its enemies. The prisoners didn't just hear about American production, they worked inside it. They watched assembly lines that seemed to outrun time, factories that accomplished in months what others attempted in years. America built ships faster than they could be sunk, rolled out aircraft in numbers that seemed impossible, and flooded the world with trucks, tanks, and tools. What stunned the POWs most wasn't only the scale, it was how it was achieved. Not by slave labor or terror, but by free citizens, often unionized, sometimes striking, yet producing at levels no dictatorship could match. They saw the messy, noisy, argumentative reality of democracy and realized that this apparent chaos was a source of strength. They also saw the contradictions. In some towns, German POWs could enter restaurants where Black Americans could not. Some prisoners mocked that hypocrisy, pointing out the irony of being treated better than citizens of color. Yet even that contradiction taught something. America allowed protest, debate, pressure for change. Under a dictatorship, contradictions were denied. In a democracy, they were fought over and sometimes resolved. The most human moments came not on battlefields, but at holidays. Christmas year 1944, as the Battle of the Bulge raged in Europe, German prisoners in American camps gathered around pianos singing carols. Local families brought food, guards shared cigarettes. For a few hours, enemies became men around a table. Those small mercies cut deeper than any lecture. When the war ended in 1945, repatriation began. Many prisoners didn't want to leave. Safety, good food and a curious sense of community had taken root. But ships waited and trains rolled east. They returned to a homeland in ruins, cities flattened, factories silent, families hungry. One man recalled, "When I set foot on German soil and saw what had happened, I just as soon turned around." Some did come back, emigrating to America, starting businesses, raising families. Others stayed in Germany but carried a private certainty they had seen the strength of a free society with their own eyes. In the end, the real victory of the American POW program wasn't only military. Hundreds of thousands returned as witnesses. They had lived under democratic rules, earned wages, read forbidden books, seen debate and dissent, and watched the factories still run. Those men became workers, managers, teachers, and voters, the human foundation of West Germany's post-war democracy. Their stories gave weight to the Marshall Plan and helped anchor trust in a different future. They arrived in America as enemies, certain of a lie. They left as men who had tasted the truth. Prosperity didn't require conquest, power didn't require cruelty. Freedom, for all its noise and contradiction, could outproduce fear. So the next time you enjoy a soda or a scoop of ice cream, remember that during World War II, those simple treats became powerful symbols. For German POWs, they weren't just luxuries, they were evidence cold and sweet, fizzy and undeniable that the enemy they'd been taught to hate was not only powerful, but generous, humane, and astonishingly abundant. Perhaps in those small, sweet moments, America won more than a war. It won something deeper, the ability to change hearts and minds through decency right in the middle of war.